Listo, muchísimas gracias. Entonces voy a pedirle a nuestro intérprete Murtado que nos ayude un poco explicando primero cómo va a funcionar la dinámica bilingüe en esta sesión.
Muchísimas gracias, Pau, por la presentación. Entonces, estamos listos ya para comenzar. Solo falta este pequeño detalle. Entonces, en la parte inferior de sus pantallas, ustedes van a ver un globito que dice interpretación. Hagan clic en ese globo, por favor, y elijan el idioma de español. Entonces, en la parte inferior de la computadora hay un globo. Elijan español. Si se están conectando desde un celular o desde una tableta, entonces no aparece el globo, aparece tres punticos. Vayan a los tres punticos y seleccionen interpretación del idioma español y ponen terminado para que se active la función. Igual las instrucciones están en pantalla y las vamos a poner también en el chat. Les recuerdo que la presentadora va a presentar en inglés, por lo tanto es muy importante elegir el canal. And I want to remind everyone who is in the meeting who is not bilingual, if you are bilingual, you may stay in the off channel, but if you're not bilingual, the recommendation is to select a language. So if English is your main language, do go to that globe at the bottom of your screen and select English, so that when someone participates in Spanish, you will hear the English interpretation. Yo creo que eso es todo para mí, Pau. Igual te voy a mandar las instrucciones para que se puedan compartir en el chat para la gente que va entrando más adelante.
Listo, muchísimas gracias. Entonces, por favor, asegúrense de cambiar el idioma a español si es que no eres bilingüe, porque esta sesión va a ser en inglés.
Am I next? Okay, excellent. Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. Again, so sorry about the delay while we figured out the technical glitches, but thank you for your patience. I have the great honor of introducing our speaker for our closing session of the Math Marathon. It's been an amazing 3 days, and we have an amazing guest for the culmination of all of the wonderful learning that's taken place. Not only is Dr. Jennifer Bay Williams an expert in equitable math education, she is also somebody that we claim as one of our own. She's a member of the Math Kind Education Advisory Board. She is an energetic advocate for effective mathematics teaching, believing that every student deserves access to high-quality mathematics. As such, she has been an active author and presenter. Her recent books include Figuring Out Fluency in Mathematics Teaching and Learning, K through 8, Fact Fluency, 60-plus games and assessment tools to support learning and retention, Teaching Student-Centered Mathematics, which is a 3-book series, now in its 3rd edition, On the Money, a math and financial literacy book series published by the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, and the iconic book, Elementary and Middle School Mathematics, Teaching Developmentally. She is a very popular presenter within the United States and around the world, working in Jamaica, China, Peru, Kenya, Nepal, and others. She's also a leader in national organizations, serving as president of the Association of Mathematics Teacher Educators, a lead writer on their standards for the preparation of teachers of mathematics, on the NCTM Board of Directors and the Board of Directors of TOTOS, Mathematics for All. She is also a professor at the University of Louisville. Dr. Bay Williams teaches undergraduate and graduate courses there while also working in local schools. So it is a privilege and an honor to host Dr. Bay Williams for this closing session. And I will turn it over to her.
Buenas tardes a todos. My presentation will be in English because I know some everyday Spanish, but not enough specialized mathematical language in Spanish. Our talk today is connecting fluency with yoga. Feel free during the session to stretch, do some yoga moves, and enjoy how the conference has stretched your mind. To begin, thank you, Jenny, for that very long introduction, by the way. All right. The purpose of yoga is to build strength, awareness, and harmony in both the mind and body. So, what does math have in common with yoga? That is what we will learn in this session. Before we get to connecting to yoga, let's make sure we all understand the definition of flexibility. A person who is flexible, or a thing that is flexible, is capable of bending easily without breaking. I think of this in teaching. We have so much pressure with teaching. And even just now, watching the team figure out how to get translation to work. No, lots of bending, no breaking. We just stick with it and figure things out. And ready and able to change to adapt to different circumstances. The second part of this definition is really critical in doing math, as you will see. So we're going to do our own stretching here at the start in solving this problem. I would like you to use the chat. First of all, I would like you to solve this problem in 2 different ways, and then pick your favorite way and enter it in the chat. So think of 2 ways. Place your favorite way in the chat. Gracias, Jorge. This is beautiful. Just in the first 5 or 6 solutions that we see are different ways of thinking. I also appreciate that some of the solutions are in numbers and some of them are in words. The same with students in how they're going to share their thinking. All right, I'm going to post another one. Once again, for this new problem, think of 2 different ways to solve it, and then enter your favorite choice in the chat. I'm just fascinated by all the amazing ideas that are there, from skip counting with addition, right? Because that is part of our understanding of multiplication, taking advantage of knowing our multiples of tens, breaking apart the 12, breaking apart the 15. So many good ideas. And for some people, they just know their 12s, so they just know the answer. Oop, and somebody is writing on my slide. Thank you. I don't know how to do that. All right, moving on. I want to take the thinking that you just did and connect it to what math fluency really is. So at least in the United States, fluency is sometimes mistaken for just knowing like how to do an algorithm. But fluency is much more than being able to do an algorithm or know a basic fact. Fluency is what you all just shared when you had two ideas for how to solve a problem, and then you decided that one was better than the other. It's that decision making that happens. So when you're solving a problem, it begins with efficiency, selecting a good idea, which depends on what the numbers are in the problem. And then once you have that idea, you actually can do it without getting too bogged down to that it's not too hard to actually do the strategy. And then if it's not going well, you change your mind, you trade it out for something else. That's the flexibility. And that you can use an idea for whole numbers, for fractions, or for other numbers. And then, of course, we ultimately want to make sure that we're doing the steps correctly, that we're enacting, and that we're getting a right answer. This is fluency. These three big ideas: efficiency, flexibility, and accuracy. And it looks like what these rectangles say. All right, so that leads to our first lesson in pulling yoga together with mathematics. Fluency is harmony among efficiency, flexibility, and accuracy. Feel free to do a yoga move if you would like to as part of the fun of your closing session and the end of a busy day. All right, we're going to do some more math, and then we'll get to our lesson number 2. And thank you to Pal for her written translations on my slides. I really cannot believe how much you accomplished in a very small amount of time. Thank you. All right, I'm going to be quiet for a moment while you think of and write. You can write it on paper. You don't need to write it in the chat, but you can write it in the chat if you'd like to. But a story that fits this expression, a story, a word problem. All right, you may still be writing, and that's fine. Thank you, Carmen, for entering an example in the chat. And Jorge, thank you. Gracias. I'm going to keep moving to part 2 of this. The next thing I would like for you to do is to solve the problem using whatever method you'd like. All right, so you've done some thinking about the story that might represent this problem and the way you might solve this problem. I had you do both of these things for a reason. But before I explain that reason, I want to ask this question. What does subtraction mean? ¿Qué significa restar?
Do you want me to read the answers in the chat, or is okay for you to do it?
So I'm seeing some wonderful things in the chat. So one thing that subtraction means is quitar, take away, right? That we're going to take away 385. So that's, think about the story that you wrote and ask yourself, is that story a takeaway story? Like you started with 404 and took away 385. Think about that. Or was it a find the difference? Did you tell a story like how much bigger, how much heavier, how much farther, find the difference, how much taller, shorter? Any of those are find the difference stories. So back to these two things you did. What happens sometimes is we tell stories that are quitar, find the takeaway. But then when we go to think about this problem, we want students to notice that these numbers are 19 apart. Like this, they're so close together. Those numbers are so close together. It's easier to find the difference than to take away 385. So what we're asking students to do is what we need is for students to understand that subtraction means, thank you, Esther, quitar, diferencia, y disminuir. Yes, it means all of those things. And that takes us to our next yoga lesson. Fluency requires harmony between understanding concepts and procedures. It's understanding that subtraction is more than just takeaway, that it's takeaway and find the difference, that opens their eyes to different ways to solve the problems. So that's our second yoga lesson. Our third lesson is going to come up front, and so that I can frame what's about to happen. Our third lesson, and please in the chat, if you can do this yoga move, please say, that's me. I've tried this one. I cannot do this one. If you can do that yoga move, please brag a little in the chat. That's amazing. All right, so this third lesson is that sometimes we focus on learning a move like this one. It's hard, and we practice it until we become good at it. Sometimes that's what we're doing with yoga. Well, the same is true with mathematics. With mathematics, we teach students to use something until they're good at it so that they can add it to their collection of strategies and choose to use it. And that's one of my favorite quotes out of one of the books that Jenny shared that I wrote, and a little picture of it's right there. That's one of my books. So in that book, we share a list of strategies that are really important ones, and we call them significant. We say they're significant because they're useful. They're ones that can be used a lot. So let's look at addition, because you just added 48 plus 49. 48 y 49, no? So you saw strategies where a person started with, say, 48 and then added on 40 and then a little bit more. That's a counting on strategy. Make tens, that's when someone moved maybe 1 over to the 49 to think of it as 50 plus 47. That's a make tens strategy. Compensation, that was the people that added 48 plus 49 and said 100 and then take 3 away. You just rounded those numbers up to 50 and then you compensated in the end. And then partial sums, those were the people who added 40 plus 40, put them together, and then the ones and put them together. So all of those methods came out in your reasoning. So
Jenny,
that's
we can't hear you.
You cannot hear me?
Now we're good.
Oh my goodness.
No, you're good now.
Okay.
5 seconds.
Okay. So I was sharing that these 4 strategies were represented in the solutions that you shared in the chat. So I don't know at what point I got cut off, but that is where we were at. And so again, here with subtraction, we have counting back. That's a takeaway interpretation. Find the difference. We could also do compensation or partial differences. So again, this connection to a lesson number 3 is we're going to teach students to feel comfortable with these strategies. So tonight, I just have a chance to focus on one. So I thought I would just highlight, what does it mean to help a student come to understand a strategy, understand it and be able to use it. So we're going to just take a peek at making tens. Here's a way to help make that strategy visible. These are 10 frames. And so you can see you have 10, 20, 9, and here's 16. And then you can record the sum on the board and then help students see that they can move one over to think about the problem as 30 plus 15. I'm pausing because I'm noticing in the chat, you might want to jump in on that translation support.
Jenny, somebody in the chat has asked you to repeat the question.
Yes. Oh, yes. I have not asked a question yet. I'm just showing how to help students visualize the make tens. So they have not solved one. Here is a way for the problem you already solved to help make it visible for students. So they can see that they could take a dot from 1 and move it over, or 2 from here to move over to the 48, or 1 from the 48 to over to the 49, and then you can record the equations. And these cards can be created in like PowerPoint slides or just on paper. And then you just mix up the numbers. So one way to help students see how making tens works is through dot patterns. And when they become familiar with that, you can do activities. This is a routine where the task is not to solve it, just to change the expression. So for example, you post one like 19 plus 28. And now I am going to ask a question. How might you change this using make tens? And you can enter that in the chat. How could you rethink it? Beautiful. So I saw an answer of 30 plus 17. So moving 2 over to the 30, to the 28 to make a 30. And then Yirsa, you naturally put the bigger number first. So you also use the commutative property. And then we have Diana sharing and Carolina Pau sharing another way, which would be to move the numbers the other way. So you see there's 2 options. So we're teaching students, you can move things one way or you can move the numbers the other way. Beautiful. All right, here's your next one. Say it as make tens. Number 2. And then this routine keeps going. So this is how the routine works, is you put the expressions up and then they share the options and then you can have them go and solve the problems or not, because you're just helping them see that they can move some amount from one number to the other. It's called the say it as make tens. That's what I call it. Say it as make tens routine. They can also do these and then just talk to a partner, this pair, so they have a chance to compare and see if they did it the same way or they did it different ways. And like I said, this strategy is useful. It also is true for decimals or fractions. So this would be here 2 8/10 plus 8 5/10. I could move 2/10 over to make a whole number. And I have 3 plus 8 3/10. So then I can do the routine for decimals and for fractions. So I'm going to ask you in the chat, how would you rethink number 1? Beautiful. And thank you for reminding me that sometimes in our cultures we use decimal points and sometimes we use commas. Beautiful. Right. So I'm seeing, oh my goodness, Piedad, that's so interesting. Instead of just moving a 10th over, the 7 1/10 moved over to make a 10 instead of making a whole. So interesting. And then for the fraction problem, those are harder to type in the chat, but students could take an 1/8 from the first fraction and move it over to the second fraction. And this is significantly more straightforward, easier, more conceptual for students than algorithms where they add the fractions separate and then have to regroup. So this is a strategy that's super useful for whole numbers, decimals, and fractions. So that's our lesson. Sometimes we focus on learning one move, make tens. We become good at it because it's so useful. It helps us with our fluency. We can choose it when it's going to help us solve a problem more efficiently. And that is our flexibility. We will choose it when it makes sense. All right. Yoga move number 4. We want to be able to do that move that very few of us could do. Congratulations to those of you that can do this move. For the rest of us, this is where we're at. And feel free to stand up and try to do one of these 1-foot poses, because this is where you start working on your balance. So we start with the basics and we build. Yeah, if you can stand on 1 foot and balance, yeah, sí puedo, yo también. So we start with the basics and we build from there. So in math, that means the basic facts. So as Jenny shared with you at the beginning, this is very near and dear to my heart, because we make a mistake when we start students off with this kind of basic fact work. This is very, it creates students who don't like math. It focuses on memorizing, which is a weak learning strategy. We've learned that from international assessments at all ages. Students feel nervous because if they forget, they're going to get, a bad grade. So it creates anxiety. So that's not what we need to do at the beginning. A good beginning starts with helping them become thinkers. So this is the beginning of my basic facts work, is thinking about how we build on what students know. So you're going to get a taste of this in a second, but we start in our very beginning preschool, early school with helping students understand what one more is, one less. We help students understand combinations of 10. And then look, here's the basics. We're going to get them ready for make 10s because we're going to teach them how to make 110. They're going to make a 10 as a way to learn how to learn their basic facts, how to be able to add 8 plus 5 and 9 plus 6 without memorizing it. They're going to learn through using this tens idea that strengthens their number sense and supports their reasoning, not just with basic facts, but with everything that comes after. How do we teach it? Well, little side story. I've been to Ecuador and I fell in love with many things. One of the things is mangoes. Bags of mangoes, mangoes on the ground that you could just pick up and eat, delicious mangoes. So I created this story for tonight to show how to teach the making 10 strategy. So I recommend pairing 2 stories. So here's story numero uno. Maria places 10 mangoes in a bowl. There are 7 mangoes on the table. Whoops, I have a misspelling there. I'm going to have to fix that. How many mangoes does Maria have? Now, based on this chart, that story is from combos of 10. And students have already learned that before I'm teaching them the making 10 strategy. So students are going to tell me that this is 10, sorry about my handwriting on screen, plus 7. And that equals 17. In Ecuador, do we cross our 7s or we don't? We cross them? Okay, so that's story 1. Let's cross the 7s. That's the way I do it. I like to cross my 7s. And then my students here say, why are you crossing your 7s? I don't know. I just learned it. So here's the second story. Raul, oh, I have another mistake here because I started to change the name and I got distracted. This is life in the real world, right? So Raul places 9 mangoes in the bowl. So there's 9 now here. There's not 10. There are 7 mangoes on the table. How many mangoes does Raul have? So what's happening is this is my second story. So I still have the story from before on the board. 10 plus 7 equals 17. Or it's on the chart paper, or they have it in their notebooks. And then I say, use your work from the first story to help you solve this. And then students stop and think, and they're like, so now we have 9 mangoes plus 7 mangoes. Well, it'd be 1 less. Yes, there's 16 mangoes. Thank you, Maria. Maria knows because she set up the first bowl. There's 16. And so then we get to talk about our thinking. How did you know it was 16? Well, it's like one of the mangoes came out of the basket. So the answer is 1 less. And we can talk about, if this number is 1 less, our answer is 1 less. And that's a pattern that's so important to math. If you take 1 away from one of the add-ins, then there's going to be 1 less in your answer. And you can also see how a student might explain that they could pick up one of these mangoes and put it in the basket to make it easier to add. Put a mango in the basket. Now you have 10 mangoes in the basket and 6 on the table. And that's what you could ask them next. So you could just ask a story. There's 8 mangoes on in the basket, 5 mangoes, and they're just going to picture, well, if there's 10 in the basket, then there'd only be this many on the table. So you're helping them think about moving the mangoes to help them visualize making a 10. So that's how you teach the making 10 strategy, through stories. Another thing that you can do is what's a picture routine. And you're going to say, wait, we just saw that. So you're going to ask how many dots and how did we see them? To begin, students get to see a pattern, but not long enough to count. So remember, they already know 10, they're 10s facts or 10 plus something. So they see this. Whoops. My slides are not coming forward correctly. And students see that dot pattern and they're like, 16. How did you know? I saw 10 and 6. 10 plus 6, 16. All right. How about this one? They see it, goes away. And on the third time, you ask students, how many did they see? 15. How do you see it? Well, it was one less than the 10 plus 6, or they say, I moved in my brain, I moved one over here. And that's how I knew that 9 and 6 was 15. So you're helping them see the make 10 strategy. Then you just do that with other examples. So here's one. So we have 10 plus 5, and then 9 plus 5. And then they've made sense of the strategy, but they've only seen a few examples. So it is time to practice. But practice is not a worksheet. Practice, it can be engaging and fun. So this is a game that's based on a card game called War. In Ecuador, do you know the card game War? What happens in the card game that people play just when they're little is you turn up 2 cards and whoever gets the biggest card wins the 2. And then you keep playing until somebody has all the cards. If you both get the same number, then it's war. Then you lay out multiple cards and you turn them up, and then somebody might win a whole bunch of cards. So this is a mathy version of that. So we're working on the making 10 strategy. So students place a card in the middle, and these are special cards that show the 10 frames, and they're awesome. But if you don't have those, these cards work too. Just regular playing cards also work. So for these cards, the student, you can see that the student with the 7 has the bigger number. That person will win the card, but they talk through the strategy. So they say, I moved 1 to the 9 to make a 10. So I had 6, not 10 plus 6 equals 16. And this student over here says, I moved 1 over to make a 10. I have 10 plus 2, 12. So then the student with the higher number wins the cards, and then they flip over new cards. So I'm going to let you practice, and you can just talk to yourself, and you can say it in Spanish. Of course, please do. So I'm going to put up your card, and you're going to practice using the make 10 strategy. Here's your card. Or I can turn it this way. Whoops, we already had that card. Let me get you a new one. Here's another card.
But Jenny, do we have to play with the 9?
Yes, you pair it with the 9. So in this case, exactly, you're moving 1 over. So then you have 10 plus 7, 17. That's the way students, that's sort of the short explanation. Then if you draw this card, a student might say 11. I just knew that one. Great, then they don't have to use the strategy. If you turn up 0, they're going to be like, it's 9. Yes, it's 9. So, but when they pull up the number and they don't know the sum, then they can use their strategy instead of counting on their fingers. So you're teaching them their facts, a way to get their answers, and you're teaching them an important number relation. Well, this game grows to la guerra de las sumas. So the sum war. So in this game, you see, you draw 2 cards. So this player draws 2 cards. And so she will see that 2 from the 5 can move over to the 8. So she has 10 plus 3, 13. And this student he's not using the making 10 strategy. He's using the other strategy that we're not working on today, but he could take 1 from the 4 and move it over and have 10 plus 3. And you might notice that this is in Spanish. And that is because with this book that I have written, my colleagues here where I live in my state, which is called Kentucky, they have developed this website. And on this website, if you click, this was your homework that was sent to you, your task to do ahead of time. If you go to this site, which I think I can do here, let me see, this is risky, but I'm going to try to do this. The games are available in Spanish. So it doesn't look like it here. All right, I'm going to stop share, and then I'm going to just share my whole screen. So this is the site. I just want to entice you into finding many, many, many games. We've seen barely one game. If you click on games and you're interested in a game like Sum War, we click on it here. And here is the teacher documents in Spanish. So it explains the importance of the game. And here's the instructions for the game. And then they have created student pages for them to record their thinking so that you have a record of all the problems that they encountered as they're playing. And you can see that on this site, there are many, many games. So we're going to see a few more of these very quickly, but I just wanted you to see the site because it is just full of things. And of course, if the we had translators from 3 different countries, but if the words are awkward, you can download the Word version and change it to language that is more familiar to your students. Okay, so now I'm going to share my screen again. And here we are, we're back again, not too bad. So this whole idea of teaching also applies to multiplication, but because we've lost a little bit of time, I'm really not going to spend very much time on this, but the idea is the same, to share a story. Sorry, this is the sequence that we would teach multiplication in, not memorize your 2s, memorize your 3s. No, we're not doing that. We're going to teach them number relations. So if they know their 2s facts, then you can use their 2s for a doubling strategy. So what that looks like is Andrea decided to grow tomatoes. She plants 2 rows with 6 plants. How many plants has she planted? So then the second story is she decided to grow more tomatoes. She has 4 rows of 6 plants. And you can do that visually as well. So you can see the 2 rows. The 2 rows gives you 12. And so 2 more rows would be 12. So you can double the 12. Whoops, sorry about that. So you're showing them if they don't know 4 times a number, they can do 2 times a number and double it again. The same can be done with dots again. This time the dots are not in a 10 frame, but here's 2 3s. and the students think 6, and then they see this, 12. So 4 3s is the same as 2 6s. So 2 6s, 4 6s. And then you can just keep going. 2 7s, and I'm going very fast because I know we've lost some time. And then 4 7s. Then the same game you already learned can be played, but now with products. So now a student turns over 3 and they think, oh, if I double 3, I get 6. And if I multiply, if I double 6, I get 12. And then same thing here. All right. Cassie, you have a question.
Jenny, we have some comments in the chat, and just thinking about how this can relate to upper basic classrooms or high school. Is there a good way to kind of be thinking about how we could use these same resources in the upper level classrooms?
I love that question, and I am going to answer it. So I'm just going to tie this up, and then I'm going to come back to that, okay? Because I really want to answer it. And actually, I wish I had one of my slides here that I don't have. All right, so thank you for asking. So anyways, we're going to start with the basics because it is going to build up to all the higher level mathematics. So that is that lesson. And I'm going to tie things up. I know we started very late, but I don't want to keep you all of that time. So I'm just going to share these other lessons with you. So here is lesson 5. So we have the strength in learning to use a move, but also it comes down to being able to choose what to move. So for example, these yoga moves all stretch different muscles. They all build different muscles. And so depending on what your situation is, you might be working, doing a different move. Well, the same thing is true with math. So this is where I'm going to give you an algebra example. Just hold on. So here, would you, for these numbers, given our conversation before, would you choose to find the difference or would you choose to take away? For me, the answer is find the difference because those numbers are close together. I'm just going to plug in one here since you asked the question. If I have this problem right here, and sorry that this is going to be super messy. All right, here we go. I'm running out of room. This problem right here. When we teach algebra, we oftentimes say the first thing to do is to eliminate parentheses. So again, we want students to be strong at being able to apply the distributive property. We do. We want them to be strong at that, but we also want them to make good choices. So if we look at this problem right here, eliminating the parentheses, applying the distributive property is one choice, but there's another choice. These terms match. So I have an opportunity to do 4 minus 3. I can go ahead and subtract as my first move. And that would give me simply x plus 2 equals 10. And then I can just look at x and say, it's 8. And that's another decision. Do I need to do another move? These are called transformations. So with algebra, you have 4 options of what you'd like to do to transform that equation. You could apply the distributive property. You could multiply or divide both sides. In this case, that's not a good option because if this would have been an 8, I could divide both sides by 2, but it wasn't an 8, so that doesn't work. I could add and subtract from both sides. That could work here. I could do that here, but it's not going to get me anywhere. I could combine like terms. Those are my 4 choices. So instead of telling students, do this, then do this, then do this, we're saying, here's your 4 choices. Which one makes the most sense for this problem? So regardless of what you're teaching, ratios, algebra, helping students know their options and helping them make a decision is critical. And we do that. I'm going to skip to an idea for that. And it's called strategize for steps. And I think we'll just close with this activity. In this activity, you're going to decide what you'd like to do first. So I put in here a simple addition example. What might you like to do first? And so the way this, and that's all the students are saying. So if it was the equation that we just had, some students might say, apply distributive property first. Some students might say, combine like terms. So you create a menu for students, and the menu looks like this. Whoops. The menu looks like this. For 38 plus 29, it's kind of like the problem we already did. You can see all the choices that students have made. And then with that menu in mind, you give them a new problem. Choose from the menu or add to the menu. Then you give them a new problem. Choose from the menu or add a new idea. And this is really helpful with ratios, proportions, solving problems even in geometry. So that is the choosing part. So that is the what move do you want? And I am going to skip this last one, but I know you want to know what all my yoga connections are. So we must focus on awareness of the mind. So when we work with children, we want them to think about what's your thinking going on? Were you using takeaway thinking? Were you using find the difference thinking? And that's the same thing with this routine. Were you thinking making tens? What do you think? Why are you making that decision? And that awareness helps them to become fluent. So you can finish those activities with asking, when will you use a make 10 strategy? Like in the chat, I mean, we've been together for an hour. Making 10 keeps coming up. When would you use the idea of making tens or make a whole?
Jenny, in the chat, we have somebody who has said changing the variable with some of the context.
Yes. Absolutely. So a yoga quote that I love is movement without awareness is exercise. Movement with awareness is yoga. And then my final yoga connection is, even though we all can't do all the moves, we can all do yoga. And the same is true with math. So I just want to close with that. Too many children feel they're not good at math. Too many adults feel like they're not good at math. We have to approach math in a way that everybody can be good at math. And I'm just seeing in the chat, Carlos doing a beautiful strategy there. Thank you so much for putting that in there. So that is my closing comment. And what I would love for you to do in the chat is to, before get your fingers on the typing board, I would like for you to share I'm going to skip it, to share a lesson that resonates with you. And it could be from one of my yoga connections, or it could be something that resonates, the very closing moments of the conference, something that resonates with you from all of the awesome sessions that you went to. So a closing thought, a lesson you've learned from the conference or from yoga. And while you're thinking of your answer and writing, as far as secondary ideas, like I said, there's so many of them. And in this, I know I focused at the younger grades. I wasn't sure what range we would have, and I knew everybody would be able to understand the whole number of examples. But I have a lot of examples in this blue book, which I think can be purchased in a PDF version or an online version. And that is goes up into solving systems of equations and things like that. It's thinking about strategies and ways to get students to reason instead of memorize. And I hope we're saving the chat so that I have more time to translate. I can't translate very quickly.
Yo puedo leer, I can read it in Spanish and you will listen in English. Se puede aprender jugando. Being flexibility as an educator to learn new math strategies and challenge students to think about how they solve math problems is in various ways. There's not a single right way. Muy buenas las estrategias aplicadas y dinámica. Las matemáticas son como el yoga, parecen complejas, pero con la práctica se pueden lograr la perfección. Se aprende manipulando material concreto. La matemática es vida y hay que vivirla. Uso de diferentes estrategias y desarrollo del pensamiento, redacción y creatividad al generar sus propios problemas, páginas que tengan recursos para bachillerato, excelente para la práctica. Con las estrategias adecuadas, los estudiantes fomentan el amor a las matemáticas, llegan a un nivel interactivo, las matemáticas no son complejas, es cuestión de práctica. Cambiar mucho nuestro enfoque y reaprender, excelentes recursos, muchas gracias. Las matemáticas son como el yoga, parecen complejas, pero con la práctica se pueden lograr a la perfección. Las matemáticas son una gran herramienta para resolver problemas cotidianos y tomar decisiones adecuadas. La matemática se aprende con material concreto y lúdicamente. El material concreto es lo mejor para los estudiantes. Las matemáticas son hermosas, no hay que hacerlas difíciles, es nuestra responsabilidad. Aplicar el completar la decena, el 10 en operaciones con términos semejantes, en álgebra, muy importante aplicarlo con yoga. Enamorarse de las matemáticas es transformar lo complejo a sencillo. There's more than a way to solve a problem. It depends on perspective. Las matemáticas están en todos los ámbitos de la vida, el yoga como otro recurso más para aprender. I'm sorry.
I noticed one of the comments was talking, the theme of this conference was no more isolation. And all of these ways that we talk about around fluency is we can be isolated even when we're in the same classroom, when students are working independently. And these routines and games are ways to stop that isolation in the class. Math isn't just something we do by ourselves. So hopefully you'll take on any of these activities and try them out. And Cassie, thank you for putting that website up again. Thank you all for joining me for this session. Thank you for participating so well in the chat.